on the gap getting bigger between the public's trust and us as officers is I've seen it in my own experience. Like when I'm dressed like this and I'm out in public, I have no problem conversating with people. I like to think of myself as an approachable person, a friendly person. I mean, I run a business. I teach classes all the time. I'm used to being in front of people speaking. I don't have any type of negative energy usually bouncing back and forth. But as soon as I put that uniform on, I see people are instantly distrustful of me. They want to avoid me, like walking down the sidewalk. They'll look down at the ground. They'll, if I want to talk to someone, you can tell that they immediately think like, oh, this cop doesn't want to talk to me. He's prodding. He's looking for something. And so even though I do believe the overwhelming majority of officers are good people, there's some distrust between us and the public.
Yeah.
And it makes our job harder. And I feel like what's going on right now is just going to make that gap grow exponentially.
Well, what is actually going on right now? I mean, from your perspective, like there are stories on either side. We've had many surgeons, neuroscientists, medical doctors on the show talking about the actual science. We had Dr. Zach Bush on the show talking about wearing a mask is actually killing people.
Yes,
and then we
exactly
have stay-at-home house arrest orders. Like this channel, this is a very unique interview we're having because we have not had a guest on quite like yourself before. But if you're just tuning in, this is former officer Greg Anderson. He was the very famous now police officer that said, I will not enforce tyrannical law. What exactly is going on, Greg? Like what is blazing inside of you to make this happen?
Well, so what I've seen, and again, I talk on my video, like my department was not enforcing these rules. My department stands for people's liberty and stands for the Constitution from what I've personally seen. But what you see around the entire country is a lot of departments are putting the Constitution on a back burner, and they're doing whatever their governor or whatever their mayor tells them. And so I felt that it was necessary for a message to come from one police officer to another saying, hey, you got to ask yourself if what you're doing is not only legal, but is it ethical? And is it the right thing? And like I touched on in my video, I was taught that as a young private in the Army. Any situation that you come across, you already know the right answer in your heart. So if you're going into some craft store and I literally just saw this an hour ago, and it's why I'm kind of fired up right now. I saw officers going to this lady who was selling candles, and they went into her store and they said, you're violating the governor's order by being open. And she goes, I'm not open. I'm not open to the public. She goes, I'm doing some inventory and I'm doing some online sales. And they're like, and your mask isn't on. You're in city limits without a mask. Another violation of the governor's order. And I just can't believe that this is continuing to happen.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your truth. I mean, I got to interrupt you there because we had a question from someone. Sean asked, what are you prepared to do as you move forward now? I think what Sean's saying, like now that you've left the force and you're out on your own, like what are you going to do with this now? What are you going to do with this fame and this momentum you have?
So it's interesting because as soon as one door closed, 1,000 opened, you know?
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of people, like I probably got 150 podcast requests this week and I've only done 3, right?
Yeah.
I looked at all the people that are requesting and just thought who would be a good fit or who would be a good person to share this message with. Yeah. And I picked a few, but there's a lot of momentum on this right now. And I'm not doing this so I have 100,000 Instagram followers. I'm doing this so we can continue to bridge the gap between police officers and the public and hopefully get more cops to say, hey, you know what? I'm not willing to infringe on people's liberties no matter what. And at all cost, I will refuse. And I'm going to start doing rallies and I'm going to keep posting videos. And the biggest thing that I think people need to be concerned about, and I know that this is like, some people think this is out of left field, but Americans are only going to be pushed so far.
Yeah.
I have personally seen in the third world countries that I've lived in, like when you take away people's ability to feed their family and you take away just the most fundamentally important things for them to survive and protect their family, when you take those things away from people, we're one step removed from becoming savages. Yeah. Like the human psyche, like can go from being, like a society that is based on law and order and people operating in a friendly demeanor to absolute utter chaos. And I am afraid that that's a possibility.
Yeah.
And I would hate to see that, because ultimately we're going to see who would we see in conflict? We would see law enforcement officers in conflict with citizens. And it's unfortunate because the majority of law enforcement officers believe what the citizens believe. They're just put in this weird spot where they're being used as the henchmen to go enforce the orders.
Wow. Let's just let that land for a moment. They are being used. They're literally being used as henchmen, but on whose orders? Like, there's different branches of government here. You pushed back against the state of Washington's governor. That's what actually got you fired. If you're tuning in right now, this is former Officer Greg Anderson. He had the ultimate courage, not only when he went to war for the United States and enforcing law as a conscious police officer, but now he shows everybody what bravery and courage actually is. So let us know in the comments what you've seen, what you've heard in your own communities, so that we can expand this conversation bigger. So when we look at right now, 2020, you talk about people being savages. What was the savage response you got from the very people that you trusted, your governor? What was that response from him?
You know, I haven't heard anything specifically from the governor, and I've had different news agencies trying to pit us against each other. And here's the thing, like, I'm not trying to make this about Jay Inslee and my governor, right? It's your governor, it's my governor, it's your mayor, it's my mayor.
Yeah.
It's any person that calls for people's liberties to be trampled on. And we are seeing it in Washington, and you're seeing it in New Jersey, you're seeing it in California. And so I do think that me speaking out, you know, I haven't gotten specific answers on where it came down from, that, hey, we got to get rid of this guy.
Yeah.
But I do think it came from the top. Yeah. I think that's likely, because
what do you mean the top, Greg? Like, what's the top?
Meaning probably the governor's office.
Yeah.
And again, I don't have any evidence to support that, but I do think that these people that have found themselves in these positions of power, what are they most afraid of? They're afraid of a bunch of people like us speaking out against it and saying, you know what? This isn't your country. We don't work for you.
Yeah.
The people are the ones that run this country, and you work for us, and we're not doing that anymore. Because if everybody would stand behind that message, including law enforcement, guess what? They're just guys in suits. They have no power to enforce anything. Without the executive branch, all these politicians that sit behind a desk, they don't have the ability to enforce anything.
Yeah.
And that's what makes me go back to them using police officers as their henchmen. Not only are those police officers being put in what I would consider physical harm's way, like if you're going into someone's house and going into somebody's business and shutting them down, there's a lot of potential for that to cause violence. And the other side of that coin is, when this all gets litigated in the future, and this is looked at as one of the biggest stains in American history, who do you think they're going to come down on? Who do you think is going to get sued?
Yeah.
They're going to be coming down on the police officers.
Yeah.
So on both ends of it, the officers are the ones that are going to eat the brunt of it and be the fall guy. And in most officers' hearts, we don't support this in the first place.
Wow, this is so powerful, man. I got to interrupt you again because we have a flood of comments coming in. What did other officers think? We're being engaged and people don't know it. Lena says, thank you for your service. We love that you picked this podcast. There's a question about martial law. I mean, you can tell by people's comments right now, so many of us are wondering, what in the actual hell is going on? From your perspective within law enforcement, now seeing it on the outside, what do you actually believe is happening to all of us right now?
Well, if you look at what martial law is, right? Like, martial law is clearly defined as an absolute, like, it's absolute chaos in the streets, and they have to shut down the cities for the safety of its inhabitants. And when have we used martial law in the past? Like when Hawaii was attacked, when Pearl Harbor happened, like way back in the Battle of New Orleans. Like, these are super dramatic things where people are dying, right? You don't get to take a disease that has a 0.00019% chance of being fatal if you catch it, and absolutely lock down everybody's cities and and tell them that they can't go out of their house, and tell them that what they have to wear on their face. Like, that is not a law enforcement function. It's never been when in anybody's lives And I've talked to my mom about this, right? And people that are in their 70s and 80s, like they're like, we've never seen anything like this in our entire lives. When in any time in American history can a cop tell you what you have to put around your face? Like, we don't have that authority. There's no laws on the books. There's nothing that exists that has been legislated that allows us to do that. And that's why I'm saying, hey, as a cop, not only should we not do that because that's infringing on people's liberties, we don't have the ability to do that. Our authority doesn't grant us that. And there's some disconnect between how law enforcement officers are supposed to and how we're legally authorized to enforce the law, and these governors and mayors that just get this idea that this is what I'm going to do now. And I'm going to have my officers enforce that.
Wow.
Like, I've heard in California, they're going to start shutting people's water and power off if they're disobeying the executive orders.
Yeah, I haven't heard that. We're here in Southern California, in San Diego area, and the energy and the conversations that we're seeing here, Greg, is about freedom, about health freedom, about personal liberty. You know, there's a phrase that's on so many of the officers' doors, and it's for the people, in service and good for the people. Now, there's a difference when you look at somebody behind a desk who possibly never enforces laws, just writes checks and gives people orders to do and put out. Those people have a disconnection. There's a fundamental disconnection between the people that are, quote, making the laws and the actual officers, like the men and women who are enforcing these laws. What were your colleagues saying? Were they on your side?
I'm not kidding you. And maybe it's because people don't want to argue with me because I get passionate about this stuff.
Yeah.
But 100% of my coworkers are in absolute agreement with me. They cannot believe the stuff we're seeing officers do nationwide. And that's why I was compelled to talk about it in my video. I said, I understand that you got a mortgage. I do too. I understand you have babies to feed. I do too. It doesn't matter what your financial situation is or your personal financial commitments. None of that is relevant because this is simply a matter of law, and this is simply a matter of right and wrong. And we do not have the option to go and enforce these executive orders and destroys people's livelihoods. We don't have that option.
Your follow-up video touched me and touched all of us in the community. We were talking about it earlier today, and you actually said, look, I learned a long time ago when I was protecting the country that if I believe in something, I'll really die for it. I'll put my life on the line for it. And in this piece here, I mean, who knows what's going to happen, man? You know, you put up a GoFund page, you just requested support. Now it's like almost $500,000 that are thrown your way. It's an incredible amount of responsibility. Like, how are you handling that? And how are you going to use this energy, this momentum you have for our health freedom, for our personal liberty?
Yeah, I can tell you the GoFundMe thing exploded 100 times more than anything we ever imagined.
Well, money's energy. It doesn't shock me. It's people want to give you love. People want to support you, man, because you're supporting us by your bravery.
Yeah, and like I said before we started recording, like a lot of people are writing me and they're just saying, hey, I just wanted to throw this much money your way to support your cause and go buy your sailboat and sail the world. You know, like they're not expecting like me to just have a lifelong goal of being a freedom fighter or whatever it is. But I can tell you, there's been a lot of momentum gaining from this. A lot of people are appreciative of this message. Yeah. And I understand that, like, I'm not saying that I'm the guy that needs to be doing this, but as of right now, I have gained a lot of momentum and I'm committed to keeping it going and continuing to spread that message. And so, you know, we plan on setting up our own podcasts, and so we can continuously talk about this and get this message out. I just flew to Montana to do a podcast yesterday. I'm flying down to Sacramento tomorrow morning. Like, I'm going to continue to travel and I'm going to continue to try and preach this message in the most peaceful way possible. Yeah. But the other side of that is, like, if it does go to violence at some point, I'm sworn to protect the American people and protect my family. And I don't think that that is out of the realm of possibility. And, you know, I touched on it in my video. I don't think that the majority of police officers and government employees have any idea what that's like to think about fighting in the streets again. I haven't done that in 15 years, you know, but that's a real possibility. And it makes me sad because unless you've seen that with your own eyes, like, maybe you don't understand how terrible that is. Yeah. And I would hate for our children on our own streets to be subjected to violence, when I feel like right now it is something we could take a step backwards and be like, hey, before we push people to this point, let's take a look at what we're doing.
Yeah.
And let's try and resolve this and move forward in something that brings the public and the government closer together instead of just continuing to widen that gap.
We are at in my opinion, I'm 40 years old. This is the biggest choice point. Someone mentioned it in the comments, the biggest choice point we've ever seen in my lifetime. Would you say that this is the most large beacon of truth that you've ever had to stand behind in your entire life?
Yeah, undoubtedly. And I mean, that's coming from someone that's done 14 combat tours. Like, that was a better part of a decade of my life being deployed. But right now, it's so much more important in my heart because this is the soil that my children live on. Like, this is going to affect their future. And not to discount the importance of the Iraqi people or the Afghan people, but when it's your own family that's facing things, it affects you a little differently. Yeah. And I'll say this, I've had a lot of people, like, not a lot of people, but some of the, I mean, as soon as you get a public platform, you get people hating on you, you know? And they're like, oh, you're talking about violence and fighting in the streets, you're inciting violence. And I'm like, no, hold on a second. This is a plea to avoid violence.
Yes.
Okay. But it's foolish to just sit back and pretend like it's not even a possibility. You know, to tell you the truth, I'm actually surprised that we haven't seen more yet. Because as soon as you take someone's livelihood away, a lot of those people are going to be in despair.
No, I'm not surprised because there is a mass agenda. There is a propaganda campaign on multiple levels that has been brainwashing people for a long time. And this never was, and I don't think it never has the intention of being a conspiracy podcast. This is about intelligence, right? And you and I were chatting before we even hit the record button. Intelligence ain't how smart you are. Intelligence is our ability to gather information, listen to people that are courageous, listen to people that are educated, to apply the information. And then lastly, man, embody it so that we actually can take a stand for what we believe in. Many of the people are asking this big question right now, Greg. Lena Orlando says, what do you suggest the people do? What do we do to have freedom and to really embody this intelligence about freedom?
What I think would do this country the greatest service is if everybody just said, you know what, as an individual, free thinking, free American, I'm going to open my business tomorrow if I want to.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to stay home tomorrow if I want to, because I feel like I'm an at-risk person. Let people make their own decisions. But if people would just do it nationwide, so if the people would do this nationwide, the government doesn't have the resources or the ability to go after them. And it's a two-tiered approach. The people need to say we've had enough, and then law enforcement officers on the patrol level need to say, you know what, and we're not going to be your henchmen anymore. We're going to allow our citizens to go about their business and provide for their family and open their businesses. And the thing is, if that message went out to everybody, because the majority of people are feeling that, but the majority of people are afraid, you know what? If I stand up against this machine, then I'm going to be the one that gets either put in jail. I know Washington State is talking about revocation of business licenses if you're seen open. Like, these things are scaring people.
Yeah.
But if we all did it together and said, we're not standing for this anymore, you would see a change because the government wouldn't have an option other than to accept it.
All right, Lena, there's your answer. Share this video right now if you guys are inspired by what former officer Greg Anderson is saying. Greg, when it comes to tyranny, like real tyranny, what do you see right now that what tyrant needs to be knocked off here? Is it multiple tyrants? Is it an energy? Is it a certain speak that people are believing that's true, that's not true? Like, what is the real tyrant here?
I mean, I feel like it's definitely becoming politicized, right? And I didn't want to get into that too much because they want to make everything a right versus left issue, right? Because what does that do? That continues to divide us.
Yeah.
But what I'm seeing is a united front on different religions, different political beliefs. Everybody's like, hey, we should have the right to go back and pursue our livelihoods. Yes. And so, you know, I think that the tyrants, and again, like, yeah, we're not sending people to gas chambers right now, but at what point do you say, you don't have the ability to do that to me anymore?
Yeah.
Because Sure, they're not doing that right now, and I'm not saying they're going to, right? But what I am saying is they're absolutely infringing on people's liberties. And it doesn't matter if that's large or small, because as soon as you say, you know what, it's not that big of a deal, then they're going to chip away a little more.
Yeah.
And they're going to chip away a little more. It's like people will say like, hey, I don't care if cops search my car. If you have nothing to hide, why can't they search your car? And the reason that is a fundamentally wrong outlook is because you have the liberty and the protection under the Constitution to not have your car searched if you didn't do anything wrong.
As long as you speak up for it, as long as you know the law and you have the courage to speak it.
Exactly. Yeah. Like people shouldn't just bend over and allow law enforcement to infringe on their rights and their liberties.
Wow. Honestly, Greg, I'll just interrupt you. You're healing my relationship with law enforcement right now. Just by you speaking your truth. How many people feel inspired by Greg's truth? I mean, you feel it in your body. Like when we hear the truth, it sticks somewhere deep in our soul, man. So I just want to thank you for having people heal their relationship with law enforcement. I think that's what this is. It's a return home. It's a call to arms for us to join with the officers. It's not us versus them.
Yes,
we're all doing the best that we can. Many questions have come in about the truth. What do you see as the truth right now for us, for you, for society? Like, what is the truth? Do we take off our masks and take a stand for what we believe in? Do we wait in the wings and see what happens? Where do we go now? My truth is exactly that. We need to open our country back up, and we need to allow people to pursue their happiness. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you what started raising red flags for me almost immediately, okay? When this first thing kicked off, I actually closed my business because I own a jiu-jitsu academy and a CrossFit gym, right? Where people are sweating on each other, they're in close combat, you know what I mean? Like, if there's a real dangerous disease going around, that's probably something that we should take a step back from. And so I closed my business before it was mandated by the government, because as a respectable person that wants to protect my students and my team, hey guys, let's figure out what's going on and just take a few weeks off and analyze the facts, okay? But immediately, and I don't know what it was like in California, but in Washington State, immediately, everything shut down except for, and they started naming what was deemed essential from the governor's office: liquor stores, marijuana shops. And I'm pro both of those things. People, you do what you want to do, right? Yes. But you start to see a trend. Auto licensing. So like tabs for your cars, okay? The lottery. Washington State lottery was deemed essential. That got to stay open and operate. Any type of construction contract that was contracted by the government, that was deemed essential. But any private construction was deemed non-essential. And you started to see crystal clear that, anything that pads the government's pockets is somehow just arbitrarily deemed essential. And right there, they lost credibility. Yeah. Because that proved to me, you're not trying to protect people's safety. What you're trying to do is ensure that you keep making your money, but you don't care about your citizens' ability to make money and feed their family. All you care about is feeding the machine. And so right from the get-go, I was like, hey, these things aren't adding up. This is not making sense. And then you just saw it go downhill from there. Well, we had a statement actually, to play devil's advocate, because I love free speech. I want people to engage in conversation. Greg, like that's what this is about, man. And Diana said there's a real dangerous disease going around. The fact that governments don't shut down those businesses doesn't mean that there's not a pandemic going on. To that, I take a deep breath. And I respond by saying, no one is disrespecting the lives that have been lost. No one is saying that death is not one of the most challenging things that we all deal with, but it is an inevitability. And in my question for you, and what I'd love all of us to really ponder here through that deep breath that Diana was brave enough to bring up, how do we decide the lives of the few for the lives of the many? We see suicide rates going up. We see child abuse going up. We see literally health complications, domestic violence, so many things happening on the other side of the coin. At what point do we take a breath, take an honest assessment of our situation, and move forward together? It's challenging either way. Of course it is. And there's no answer, no path that we can go down where everybody's going to be safe. Yeah. Right? Like that doesn't exist. That's not reality. But by us wanting to open our businesses and restore people's livelihoods, just like you said, that's not detracting from the people that are vulnerable
or the people that have gotten sick from this. Like anytime someone gets sick or anybody passes due to a disease, it's tragic. And I don't think by not wanting to see our entire country implode that we're being insensitive to those people. And I'll tell you this, like, I don't like to get into the medical side of things because I'm not a doctor. But my best friend on planet Earth, he was the best man at my wedding. He's been my best friend since we were 12 years old. He is a physician in Queens, New York. He has 200 COVID patients. I talk to him almost daily. And the things that you're hearing on the media versus what he's seeing, they're not matching up. That's the truth. And he told me, he's like, I see people die every day. This is a terrible disease. But he's also saying what we're being told about social distancing, what we're being told about you have to have a mask on. He's like, as a medical professional, no, I'm not seeing what's being put out on the news and what's being put out on from the governors and from the mayors. And so I'm seeing a firsthand account, both as a law enforcement officer and a firsthand account from my best friend who's literally in the epicenter of COVID.
Yeah.
And things aren't matching up. Well, and if people aren't willing to take a step back and be like, okay, we understand that people are getting sick, but there's something else going on here. It's clear as day.
You're ringing a bell of truth right now. Everyone share this if you're feeling the same truth, because what I know to be true is that we are at this point where we're either going to move forward and have freedom and really honor our forefathers. Can you imagine what it would have been like, Greg, 1776 coming over here, like under colonial rule, and then having to have the Tea Party? Like, people forget how easy it is to not repeat history unless you're aware enough to have the courage to not let it repeat. And I think that's what you represent, man. And I'm so honored that you chose this podcast, this platform, to speak your truth on. If you had some intelligence and some guidance for people that are navigating this space in their city, local, state, and even federal government, how do they navigate this process right now? What are their real rights? How do they keep their health under rights for themselves, health freedom? And what are their personal rights that you can share with us?
Well, and I would say this, because I've been asked that question on all the appearances that I've been making. Like, I don't want my message to be your truth. I'm just a man, just like you're a man, right? But what I'm imploring people to do is simply look at the facts and ask themselves, does this feel right in my heart? Does this seem like the right thing to do? Because there's a reason that there's international outrage when we see that young woman in the New York subway dogpiled by 6 cops for not wearing a mask. There's a reason for that. Yeah. And that's because we know fundamentally in our hearts, that's incorrect. And I think I almost find it offensive that the government feels like they need to protect us, because I would like to think as of the American people is emotionally intelligent enough to find out and look inward and decide what's going to work best for them. And I think if people do that and they ask themselves, what do I feel comfortable doing? Where's my line in the sand? Where am I not going to get pushed any farther? If people start to come to terms with these things, then when they find themselves in that situation, they're already going to have their answers, because it's already been something that they've ran through and in their mind and in their heart. And I don't know if you saw the video I posted yesterday, but it talked about that. In the military, we call it wargaming. Mm-hmm. And you look at the mission that's ahead of you, and once you start analyzing that mission, what could go right, what could go wrong, what problems may be presented, what am I going to have to navigate through? And if you do that ahead of time, once you're out on the streets and you're being confronted by someone, or someone gets hurt, or a vehicle breaks down, guess what? We already have the contingency plans planned out. And I think it's an important time for Americans to look at themselves, look at their businesses, look at their finances, and say, where am I willing to take this? When am I willing to take it there? And why? And I think if people people will overwhelmingly come up with similar answers.
Wow. I'm so inspired. I feel it in my heart when you mention that. And, courage is something that a lot of people talk about, but the actual courage to take an action, to stand for something that you believe in, sharing this video is an act of courage. Do you know how many people, Greg, that have been completely annihilated and been called conspiracy theorists and fearmongers when they just want to connect with their heart and speak their truth? Like, that's really where we're at right now, my friend.
It's exactly right. And that's just an absolute tool that they use. If anybody wants to speak up for freedom or what they believe to be their truth, oh, they're just put them in a corner with a tinfoil hat, you know? Like, it's easy to want to discredit people. But I think that it's becoming such a nationwide issue that we have to take a step back and be like, okay, there's actually a lot of validity to what we're seeing. There's a lot of validity to people's concerns nationwide.
In your training for martial arts, in your training for the military, in your training for being a law enforcement officer, shoot, in your training to be a parent, there's challenges that come your way for people that are feeling ultimately challenged to their core to decide if they're going to follow their heart or not. What kind of guidance could you give them from that emotional intelligence perspective?
Well, I'll tell you, and I'm biased because I'm a martial artist and a jiu-jitsu guy. But what I've found through martial arts, and people can find it through CrossFit or swimming or endurance running, is that you learn to find comfort in discomfort. And you learn to have to navigate through this arduous path of pain and exhaustion. And once you start to harness the physical aspects of that, I always tell people, jiu-jitsu is 10% of jiu-jitsu is about trying to choke somebody out. That's a very small part of it. The overwhelming aspect of what you gain as a martial artist is you learn how to navigate through life, and you learn how to confront danger. You learn how to confront discomfort. And what you'll find is you learn that in the physical, and then you start to embody that, and then that starts to be who you are, and you start to embrace that on the mental side of things and the emotional side of things. So I am an absolute proponent of physical training, because I think that is the foundation of building who you are. And once you develop strengths in that realm, it carries you over every other aspect of being a human being.
We had a guest on the show and he said the body is the subconscious mind. So it's exactly what you're talking about, Greg. What an incredible conversation, man. Super grateful for what you're doing in the world. You really are a brother. Like, I know we've never met in person. We're meeting right now for the first time.
Yeah.
I knew it when I heard it from your mouth. And everybody that liked your video and that sent you the $500,000 and that really put you on the pedestal of truth. You're just a human like us. Separation
exactly
is
right.
an illusion. You're a brother. People that are watching this are brothers and sisters. Let's do this together. Take a stand for your freedom.
Course.
Greg, direct people to where they can support you and where they can connect with you more, please.
So, my main platform is my Instagram. And I went from 1,000 followers to like 70K in the last couple of weeks. But it's Granderson, GR, and then my last name, Anderson, 33. And again, the 33 was because I was 33 years old when I started Instagram. I've gotten inundated with questions like, what does 33 mean? That's a secret number. I was like, no, guys, you're looking into it too much. That's all it was. It was my age. But, I invite people to get on my page and like the people we're just doing with you, start dialogues and start questions and try and understand the other side of the coin. I'm avoiding the hate because there's a lot of it. If you come at me with hate, I'm not going to put my energy into that. But if you come at me with questions, and again, I've received like probably 20,000 emails in the last week. I'm getting to what I can. I'm interacting with people that I can. But it's also overwhelming. So, it is what it is at this point.
Well, look, I'm not a religious man myself, but I am a spiritual man because we're all spiritual beings. We're all figuring out what we're doing in this world to have this great human experience. And what's funny is that in the Bible, Christ was 33 when he had his moment where he taught us the biggest lesson we could all ever learn. So the fact that you said 33 and that you told me in the past 6 months your faith has deepened, it's no surprise to me, man, that you've become this messenger of truth for the people. So thank you so much for being on the show, and we will talk to everyone soon. Please share this podcast with everyone that you know that wants health freedom, that truly wants health freedom.
And do I have time to say one more thing?
Yeah.
So a lot of people, I've been getting inundated with messages saying, we need you to be a mayor. We would like you to run for governor. We need someone like you to lead us. And I would just say to people, instead of looking to someone to lead us, because I'm not up here while you're down here. We're all on the same mission and we're all equals. Instead of looking at someone as someone that's going to be the person to lead you through this, ask yourself where your lines are. Ask yourself where you stand on it. And then we move forward together, side by side, instead of having these different tiers of who we are as people.
Powerful message. Aho. We'll see everyone very soon. And until we do, we're wishing you love and wellness and also freedom. Thank you, Greg, for coming on.